Story 1. I travel for work about twice a month, so I've seen my share of airplane drama over the years. Usually it's just minor stuff, people reclining seats too far back or taking too long in the bathroom. But I've never experienced anything like what happened on my flight from Chicago to Denver last month. I work in sales for a medical equipment company, which means regular trips to conferences and client meetings. Flying used to be somewhat pleasant, but these days it feels more like riding a crowded bus in the sky. Still, I've learned to make the best of it with noise-canceling headphones and a good book. This particular flight was completely full, not an empty seat anywhere. I had managed to snag an aisle seat in row 18, which I prefer because I'm tall and like being able to stretch my legs occasionally. The middle seat was occupied by a quiet businessman who seemed content to keep to himself. About 10 minutes before takeoff, this woman came rushing down the aisle checking seat numbers. She had the window seat in our row. Right from the start, she seemed agitated about something. "Karen, excuse me, you need to move so I can get to my seat." I stood up and stepped into the aisle to let her pass, which is standard airplane etiquette. She squeezed past the middle seat passenger and settled in by the window with a lot of huffing and dramatic sighs. As soon as she sat down, she immediately claimed both armrests, the one between her and the middle seat, and somehow managed to angle herself so she was also using part of the armrest between the middle and aisle seats. The businessman in the middle looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. I figured maybe she'd adjust once we took off and people settled in for the flight. About 30 minutes into the flight, I needed to use the bathroom. Standard procedure, I stood up and started to step into the aisle. "Karen, where are you going?" "Me, to the restroom." "Karen, well, you'll have to wait. I'm not comfortable with people climbing over me every few minutes." "Me, I'm not climbing over you. I have the aisle seat." "Karen, I don't care. It's disruptive and I'm trying to rest." The middle seat passenger and I exchanged confused looks. She was essentially trying to trap me in my seat. "Me, ma'am, you have the window seat. I have the aisle seat. I don't need your permission to get up." "Karen, I'm a premium member with this airline. I have priority over regular passengers." "Me, that's not how airplane seating works." She crossed her arms and somehow managed to spread herself even wider, taking up more space on both armrests. "Karen, I paid for my seat just like everyone else, and I deserve to be comfortable." At this point, other passengers were starting to notice the commotion. The businessman in the middle seat finally spoke up. "Middle seat passenger, ma'am, he has every right to use the aisle to get to the restroom." "Karen, nobody asked for your opinion." I decided to just step into the aisle anyway. It's not like she could physically restrain me. But as I stood up, she deliberately stuck her leg out to block me. "Karen, I told you to wait." "Me, you can't block me from leaving my seat." "Karen, watch me." That's when I pressed the call button for the flight attendant. This was beyond ridiculous. When the flight attendant arrived, she assessed the situation quickly. "Flight attendant, what seems to be the problem here?" "Me. This passenger is preventing me from getting to the restroom." "Karen, he's being disruptive and climbing all over people constantly." Flight attendant, "Sir, how many times have you gotten up since takeoff?" "Me, this would be the first time." The flight attendant looked at Karen with raised eyebrows. Flight attendant, "Ma'am, passengers are free to move about the cabin when the seatbelt sign is off. You can't prevent someone from leaving their seat." "Karen, I have medical conditions that require me to have both armrest and minimal disruption." Flight attendant, "If you have medical needs, we should have been notified during booking so we could accommodate you properly." "Karen, I shouldn't have to explain my personal medical information to everyone." Flight attendant, "You don't have to explain anything, but you also can't restrict other passengers' movement." "Karen, this is discrimination against people with disabilities." The flight attendant remained professional but firm. Flight attendant, "Ma'am, I'm going to need to move you to a different seat where you'll be more comfortable." "Karen, I'm not moving anywhere. Flight attendant, actually, you are. We have a seat available that will better suit your needs. She returned a few minutes later with another crew member. They asked Karen to gather her belongings and follow them. She protested loudly, but eventually complied when they explained the alternative was diverting the plane to the nearest airport. The flight attendant escorted her to the very back of the plane right next to the bathrooms. The constant foot traffic and door opening and closing back there would definitely not be conducive to the peaceful rest she claimed to need. As they walked past our row, Karen glared at me. Karen, this is all your fault. I hope you're happy. Me, I just wanted to use the bathroom. After she left, the businessman in the middle seat finally relaxed and reclaimed his armrest. The rest of the flight was completely peaceful. Flight attendant, sorry about that situation. Some people think buying an airplane ticket gives them control over other passengers. Me, thanks for handling it so professionally. Flight attendant, part of the job. Though I have to say, putting her next to the bathrooms was particularly fitting given what started this whole thing. When we landed in Denver, I saw Karen struggling with her luggage near the back of the plane while dealing with a constant stream of passengers using the nearby restrooms. She had managed to create exactly the disrupted, uncomfortable situation she claimed to want to avoid. Sometimes people's unreasonable demands end up backfiring in the most poetic ways possible. Story 2. I've been taking public transportation to work for the past 5 years, ever since I decided to sell my car and save money on gas and parking. The bus system in our city isn't perfect, but it gets me where I need to go, and I've learned to appreciate the routine of it all. My morning commute involves catching the number 42 bus at 7:30 sharp from the stop near my apartment. The bus stop is right outside a medical building, so we get a lot of elderly passengers and people with mobility issues. Most of the regular riders are pretty understanding about giving folks extra time to board, especially when someone needs to use the wheelchair lift or moves with a walker or canes. There's this one gentleman I see almost every morning. He's probably in his 70s, uses a walking cane, and always carries a small oxygen tank with him. He's always polite, says good morning to the driver, and never complains even when the bus is running late. The drivers know him well and always make sure he has enough time to get settled in one of the priority seats near the front. Last Monday started like any other day. I got to the bus stop a few minutes early and saw the usual crowd of commuters waiting. The elderly gentleman was there too, standing patiently near the front of the line like always. The weather had been rainy all weekend, so the sidewalk was still damp and slippery. Right before the bus arrived, this woman in an expensive business suit came rushing up to the stop. She was talking loudly on her phone and looked stressed out about something. She got off her call just as our bus pulled up. The doors opened, and like always, the elderly gentleman started making his way slowly up the steps. He always takes his time because of his mobility issues, and everyone understands this. The bus driver even waits patiently and asks if he needs any help. But this woman was having none of it. Karen, excuse me, I need to get on first. The elderly man turned around, confused. Elderly man, I'm sorry? Karen, I have an important meeting downtown, and I can't be late. You're taking too long. She actually tried to push past him while he was halfway up the bus steps. The poor man had to grab the handrail to keep from falling backward. Bus driver, ma'am, please wait your turn. This gentleman was here first. Karen, I don't have time for this. He's moving like a turtle. The bus driver, who I'd seen handle difficult passengers before, kept his voice calm but firm. Bus driver, sir, take all the time you need. Everyone else can wait. Karen, this is ridiculous. I pay taxes. I have rights. Some of us have actual jobs to get to. Other passengers started speaking up. Another passenger, lady, show some respect. Second passenger, we all have places to be. Karen, mind your own business. You don't understand how important my meeting is. The elderly gentleman finally made it up the steps and was trying to find his seat, But Karen kept pushing forward, trying to squeeze past him in the narrow aisle. "Karen, move. Get out of my way." That's when the bus driver had enough. I could see his face in the rearview mirror, and he looked absolutely done with her behavior. "Bus driver, ma'am, I need you to step off the bus." "Karen, what? No, I'm getting on this bus." "Bus driver, not with that attitude, you're not. Step off." "Karen, you can't kick me off. I didn't even get on yet." "Bus driver, exactly. And you're not going to. Step away from the doors." "Karen, this is discrimination. I'm going to report you." "Bus driver, you do that. But right now, you need to get away from my bus." The elderly gentleman had finally gotten settled in his seat, looking shaken up from the whole encounter. Other passengers were shaking their heads and muttering about Karen's behavior. "Karen, I demand to speak to your supervisor." "Bus driver, you can call customer service. The number's posted right there on the window." "Karen, I'm not getting off. You have to let me on." "Bus driver, actually, I don't. I have the right to refuse service to anyone who's disruptive or disrespectful to other passengers." "Karen, I wasn't disrespectful. I just have somewhere important to be." "Bus driver, you tried to push past an elderly gentleman and called him a turtle. That's disrespectful in my book." The bus driver looked around at all the passengers who were now seated. "Bus driver, everyone ready to go?" We all nodded. Karen was still standing at the door, but she was technically outside the bus, on the curb. "Karen, wait. You can't leave without me." "Bus driver, watch me." And that's exactly what happened. The driver pressed the button to close the doors. Karen tried to grab them as they were closing, but she was too late. "Karen, this is illegal. Open these doors right now." The bus driver shifted into drive and started pulling away from the curb. Through the window, we could all see Karen chasing after the bus for a few steps before giving up. The elderly gentleman chuckled from his seat near the front. "Elderly man, well, that was quite a show." "Bus driver, some people think the world revolves around them." "Sorry you had to deal with that, sir." "Elderly man, I've seen worse. Thank you for standing up for me." The other passengers started clapping. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet appreciation for a bus driver who did the right thing. As we continued downtown, I couldn't help but look back at the bus stop. Karen was still standing there, probably trying to figure out how to get to her important meeting. The next bus on that route wouldn't come for another 30 minutes. One passenger near me was shaking her head. "Passenger, can you believe some people? Acting like her time is more valuable than everyone else's." "Me, at least she got what she deserved." "Passenger, that driver handled it perfectly. Didn't lose his temper or anything." When I got off at my stop downtown, I made sure to thank the bus driver. "Me, thanks for standing up for that gentleman back there." "Bus driver, that's my job. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, especially our seniors." As I walked to my office, I realized that Karen probably missed her important meeting anyway. Maybe next time she'll think twice before trying to push around elderly passengers. Or maybe she'll just take an expensive taxi ride instead of dealing with the rest of us regular people on public transportation. Either way, it was the most satisfying bus ride I'd had in years. Story 3. I take the regional train to work every morning, a 40-minute commute from the suburbs into downtown. It's not the most comfortable way to travel, but it beats dealing with rush hour traffic and parking fees in the city. The train gets pretty crowded during peak hours, especially around 7:30 when most people are heading to their office jobs. I started taking public transportation about 6 months ago when my car finally died and I couldn't afford the repairs. At first, I was nervous about relying on the train schedule, but it's actually been pretty reliable. Most of my fellow commuters are regular passengers like me, office workers, students, and service industry employees who've figured out the system. The train cars have rows of seats facing forward, with some tables for 4 people and some regular 2-seat configurations. During busy times, nearly every seat gets filled, and people have an unspoken understanding about sharing space efficiently. You put your bag on your lap or under the seat, not spread across multiple seats when other passengers need somewhere to sit. Most people follow basic courtesy rules. They move their belongings when someone needs to sit down. They keep conversations at reasonable volumes, and they generally try to make the commute pleasant for everyone. But every once in a while, you encounter someone who thinks the entire train car is their personal space. That someone turned out to be this middle-aged woman who started taking my usual morning train about 3 weeks ago. From her first day, it was obvious she had no intention of following normal passenger etiquette. She'd board the train with multiple bags and immediately claim an entire section of seats. Not just her own seat, but the seats across from her, next to her, and sometimes even seats a few rows away. She'd spread her purse, briefcase, shopping bags, and jacket across 6 or 7 seats like she was setting up a mobile office. The first time I saw her do this, I figured maybe she didn't realize how crowded the train gets. Some people who don't use public transportation regularly don't understand the unwritten rules about sharing space during peak hours. But as more passengers boarded and the train filled up, she made it clear that she had no intention of moving her belongings. People would approach her section looking for seats, and she'd just ignore them or pretend to be busy with her phone. Passenger, excuse me, is anyone sitting here? Karen, yes, I'm using these seats. Passenger, for what? I just need somewhere to sit. Karen, I need space for my things. Find somewhere else. The passenger would look around at the increasingly crowded car and eventually give up, either standing in the aisle or walking to another car, hoping to find an empty seat. This became her daily routine. She'd claim multiple seats for her belongings while other passengers had to stand for the entire 40-minute journey. Elderly people, pregnant women, people with disabilities, she didn't care who needed to sit down. Her bags were apparently more important than other people's comfort. I watched this happen for about 2 weeks before I decided to say something. One morning, the train was particularly crowded, and I saw an older gentleman with a walking cane struggling to find a seat, while Karen had her stuff spread across half the car. Me, ma'am, could you move some of your bags so this gentleman can sit down? Karen, these seats are taken. He can find somewhere else. Me, taken by what? Your purse? Karen, I paid for my ticket just like everyone else. I can use whatever seats I want. The elderly man looked embarrassed by the attention and said he was fine standing, but I could see he was having trouble keeping his balance as the train moved. Me, the train is for passengers, not luggage storage. Karen, mind your own business. I'm not doing anything wrong. But she was doing something wrong. The train policy clearly states that bags and personal items shouldn't occupy seats when other passengers need them. There are even announcements about it at some stations. Her attitude was incredibly selfish. She genuinely seemed to believe that buying one ticket entitled her to claim as many seats as she wanted for her belongings. Meanwhile, paying customers were forced to stand because she couldn't be bothered to put her bags on her lap or under the seat. The situation came to a head last Tuesday morning. The train was running slightly behind schedule, which meant it was more crowded than usual as people tried to catch up after missing earlier trains. By the time we reached the third stop, the aisles were packed with standing passengers. Karen had claimed her usual territory 6 seats covered with various bags, her coat, and even her coffee cup taking up space. She was sitting in the middle of this spread-out mess, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. That's when the conductor finally showed up for ticket checks. He was a middle-aged guy who'd been working the trains for years and clearly knew how to handle difficult passengers. Conductor, tickets, please. He worked his way through the car, checking everyone's tickets and helping people find seats where possible. When he reached Karen's section, he stopped and looked at the absurd amount of space she'd claimed. Conductor, ma'am, you'll need to move your belongings so other passengers can sit. Karen, I'm using these seats. Conductor, for what exactly? Karen, my things. I have a right to put my bags somewhere. Conductor, You have a right to one seat. Your belongings need to go on your lap, under your seat, or in the overhead compartments. Karen, that's ridiculous. Where am I supposed to put everything? Conductor, the same place every other passenger puts their belongings. He gestured toward the packed aisle where dozens of people were standing, many of them holding their bags while they balanced on the moving train. Karen, I'm not moving my stuff. I got here first. Conductor, ma'am, this is your final warning. Either consolidate your belongings to your assigned seat, or I'll have to ask you to leave the train. Karen, you can't kick me off. I paid for my ticket. Conductor, your ticket entitles you to one seat, not 6 seats. This is a public transportation system, not your personal living room. The other passengers were watching this confrontation with obvious satisfaction. People had been dealing with her selfishness for weeks, and everyone was glad to see someone finally call her out on it. Karen, this is discrimination. You're targeting me because I have more luggage than other people. Conductor, I'm enforcing basic courtesy rules that every passenger is expected to follow. She reluctantly started moving some of her bags, but she was taking her time and being deliberately slow about it. The conductor wasn't having any of her passive-aggressive behavior. Conductor, too late. Since you refuse to comply with basic passenger etiquette, you'll need to stand for the remainder of the journey. Karen, what? You can't make me stand. Conductor, actually, I can. You've lost your seating privileges for today. He helped other passengers claim the seats she'd been hoarding with her belongings. Within minutes, the elderly gentleman with the walking cane had a place to sit, along with several other people who'd been standing. Karen, this is outrageous. I'm filing a complaint. Conductor, you're welcome to do that. But right now, you need to move to the standing area. She gathered up all her bags and was forced to stand in the crowded aisle for the rest of the trip. Every time the train took a curve or stopped at a station, she struggled to keep her balance while juggling all her belongings. The best part was watching her try to manage all the bags she'd insisted on spreading across multiple seats. She couldn't hold everything comfortably, and items kept falling or shifting around. Other passengers had to step around her constantly as she took up space in the aisle. Conductor, this is exactly why we have rules about keeping belongings contained to your personal space. For the remaining 25 minutes of the journey, Karen got a first-hand experience of what other passengers had been dealing with because of her selfishness. She looked miserable standing there with all her stuff, especially when she saw other people comfortably seated in the spots she'd been hoarding. When we finally reached downtown, she was one of the first people off the train, clearly frustrated and embarrassed by the whole experience. I haven't seen her on my morning commute since then. Maybe she found a different train, or maybe she finally learned to pack lighter and share space like a normal person. Story 4. I've been working on cruise ships for about 4 years now, and it's been an amazing experience. I started as a dining room server right after finishing hospitality school, and I've worked my way up to assistant food and beverage manager. The job has taken me all over the Caribbean, Mediterranean, and Alaska. Sure, the hours are long and you're away from home for months at a time, but I love the international crew, the travel, and honestly, most of the passengers are great. My current ship holds about 3,000 passengers, and we do 7-day cruises. The buffet is huge, probably the biggest food operation I've ever seen. We serve thousands of people every meal, and the variety is incredible. Fresh seafood, carved meats, international cuisine, desserts that look like art pieces. The company spends a fortune on food quality and presentation. One thing that always amazes me is how much food people waste. The buffet is unlimited, you can go back as many times as you want, try everything, eat until you can't move. But some people still feel the need to hoard food or try to game the system somehow. Usually it's just someone trying to take fruit back to their cabin, which we're pretty relaxed about. But sometimes you get people who take things way too far. This past Tuesday, we were 3 days into a Caribbean cruise when I got a call from the security office. The head of security wanted me to come down and look at some surveillance footage from the buffet. Security chief, we've got something interesting here. Take a look at this. He pulled up footage from the previous evening's dinner service. I could see the usual crowd of passengers moving through the buffet line, loading up their plates. Then the camera angle switched to show a woman near the dessert station. Me, what am I looking for? Security chief, just watch her for a minute. The woman was middle-aged, wearing a cruise ship t-shirt and carrying what looked like a small rolling suitcase. At first she seemed to be browsing the desserts normally, but then she started doing something weird. She kept looking around nervously, then opening her suitcase and quickly putting food items inside. Security chief, keep watching. It gets better. I watched as she moved from station to station, grabbing entire serving spoons full of shrimp, loading up containers with carved turkey, stuffing bread rolls into plastic bags. She wasn't being subtle about it either. The suitcase was getting so full she could barely close it. Me, is she seriously trying to steal an entire buffet? Security chief, gets worse. Check this out. He switched to a different camera angle that showed her at the fruit station. She was loading whole pineapples, bananas, apples, basically creating her own grocery store in that suitcase. Security chief, we estimate she took about 40 pounds of food. That's not counting the lobster tails. Me, lobster tails? Security chief, oh yeah, she went back to the seafood station 3 times, grabbed probably 15 lobster tails and just dropped them right in the suitcase on top of everything else. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman was literally shopping the buffet like it was her personal takeout counter. Security chief, here's the best part. Watch what happens when she tries to leave. The footage showed her struggling to wheel the overstuffed suitcase toward the exit. It was so heavy she could barely pull it, and food was starting to leak out the sides. Other passengers were staring as she dragged this thing across the dining room floor. Me, did anyone stop her? Security chief, she made it back to her cabin, but housekeeping reported a suspicious smell and food stains in the hallway. That's when we pulled the camera footage. Security chief, we're going to need you there when we confront her. This falls under food service violations. An hour later, we knocked on her cabin door. She answered looking completely innocent, like nothing had happened. Security chief, good evening, ma'am. We need to speak with you about an incident from last night's dinner service. Karen, I don't know what you're talking about. I just ate dinner like everyone else. Me, ma'am, we have you on camera removing large quantities of food from the buffet. That's against ship policy and considered theft of provisions. Karen, that's ridiculous. The buffet is unlimited. I can take as much as I want. Security chief, you can eat as much as you want in the dining area. You cannot remove food from the restaurant in containers or luggage. Karen, it's for my cabin. I get hungry at night, and room service is expensive. I'm just being practical. Me, ma'am, you took approximately 40 pounds of food, including lobster tails, carved meats, and whole fruits. That's well beyond personal consumption. Karen, prove it. You can't prove anything. Security chief, actually, we can. We have complete surveillance footage, and housekeeping documented the mess in the hallway outside your cabin. He showed her some printed screenshots from the security cameras. Her face went pale as she saw herself clearly loading the suitcase. Security chief, we also need to inspect your cabin for health and safety reasons. Karen, you can't come in here. This is my private space. Security chief, ma'am, this is a ship. We have the right to inspect any cabin for safety violations. We entered the cabin, and it was immediately obvious where all the food had gone. The smell hit us right away, seafood and other perishables that had been sitting in a warm cabin for almost 24 hours. The suitcase was open on the bed, and food was scattered everywhere. Some of it was already starting to spoil. Me, ma'am, this is a serious health hazard. Perishable food cannot be stored in passenger cabins like this. Karen, I was going to eat all of it. It's not going to waste. Security chief, the lobster tails alone are worth over $200. The total value of food removed is approximately $500. Karen, $500. That's insane. Me, that's wholesale cost. The retail value would be much higher. Security chief, you'll be receiving a formal bill for theft of provisions, plus a cleaning fee for the cabin contamination. The total comes to $850. Karen, this is highway robbery. I'm never cruising again. Security chief, the charges will be automatically added to your cabin account. You can dispute them with guest services, but the surveillance evidence is pretty clear. We arrange for housekeeping to properly dispose of all the spoiled food and sanitize the cabin. The next day, I heard from guest services that she tried to dispute the charges, claiming she didn't know the rules. But when they showed her the footage of her looking around nervously while stuffing food in her suitcase, she dropped the complaint. The funny part was, if she just asked, we probably would have packed her some fruit or snacks for her cabin. Most cruise staff go out of their way to make passengers happy. But trying to smuggle out an entire seafood buffet, that's a new one, even for me.